Hello everyone. Welcome to Embroidered Bag Workshop Lesson 1. This is an overview. I'm going to talk about how to create these bags in this workshop. I want to emphasize that this is my method for doing this. If you find a better method that works for you, I'm going to encourage you to do it, but I will show you how I do it. We're going to talk a little bit about applique not only in wool but also in linen and silk, just in case you are allergic to wool. The pattern for this particular workshop is going to be a pretty simple tri-fold bag with a strap. The body of the bag looks like this. It's just the body here with the opening and then the flap where the embroidery happens. It's very simple, and a lot of what we'll do is just that embroidery. I'm going to talk about embroidery later on. I'm also going to talk about uh, embellishing with beads and whatnot later on. And at the very end of this entire workshop, what you'll have is a strapped bag. It'll have a gusset, which is all in one with the strap, a nice open and fairly nice bag to carry all your stuff in. So let's get started. I have a book here called Purses and Pieces that I have been enjoying going through. It doesn't have wool bags in it, but it does have a lot of bags from period in it, and there are some satchel examples. I mainly use this book as a source for inspiration. Some of these bags even have embellishment on them, which is kind of cool. Most of them are in leather. And here's the example of the satchel bag. And bags are just useful for just about anything you want to do. It's pretty nice to have and put all your stuff in because most of the time clothing in period doesn't really have pockets. This particular book I would encourage you to pick up because it has some really interesting patterns. Here's one of them. This is another one of those double fold bags. It folds over and then you can kind of see there's a pocket inside and then it just hooks onto your belt. I really like that one. But by the time you're done with this workshop, you'll be able to make this for yourself. I want to talk a little bit now about my design sources. For those of you who will be doing your own designs, I would encourage you to get books such as this. Dover has a number of these kinds of books. Nice black and white images so that you can pull stuff from them. My favorite part of this particular book is back here in the tile section. I take a lot of my inspiration for embroidered wool bags off of this. You can take some very simple shapes off of this, create simple line drawings that you can then use for your applique. I'm going to encourage you to do some very simple shapes if you're designing your own stuff. Don't get too bogged down. The more complicated the applique, the more difficult it is to sort of handle. If you have friends that you can ask for help, such as my friend Saruko Sensei, she did these designs for me based on various period texts, and I went ahead and created some appliques off them. Very simple shapes. I've simplified the shape entirely and fit it inside of the bag front to make sure that it'll fit completely. Here's another example inside the bag front in the shape. Very, very simple. Don't make things too hard on yourself because mainly these applique bits are simply a vehicle for the embroidery later. I like using big giant appliques and then applique onto the bag and then embroidery, and that actually does a nicer job of conveying the color. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk next about color. So when you're looking for things to do, it all depends on the kind of wool that you can find. Uh, and so basically you want these things to match. And you don't want to have too bright a color with too dark a color and what have you. I would encourage you, highly encourage you, to go ahead and get yourself a color wheel. I've had this one for years, and I use it to find all kinds of complementary colors for different things. Like this rust wool here, for instance. It sort of matches that area right there. And now that I know that it matches that area, I stay within that band of color for the colors that I use to complement the embroidery. Uh, this is really helpful because oftentimes it's hard to sort of figure out what goes with what. And the color wheel sort of keeps me honest and keeps me from doing stupid things. It also helps me if I've found an odd color of wool. I can kind of find that on the color wheel a little bit. If you're not too sure, you can go ahead and use the back, add some white, and it's kind of like that color. So I know I'm in that range. So it lets me know that anything that I want to use as a complement is going to have to be in that particular range. And that way, if you can only find a certain type of color or a certain type of wool with a type of color and you can't find what you want, you can kind of keep things neat and tidy color-wise. You can see in this bag, I mainly stayed with yellows and greens. And that's the lovely thing about the color wheels. It really helps you figure out what can go with what. Like this rust color, for instance. It's in that band, so I know that green goes with it. And if I want something else, like this blue, it goes with that right there. So these three colors will complement each other nicely. I like to have about 3 colors when I do embroidery, just for choices. Go ahead and get yourself a color wheel. I highly recommend it. Let's talk a little bit about your materials. For those of you who are sourcing your own materials, I would suggest for wool, get yourself 100% Melton or coat weight wool. It's a fairly thick wool. It'll stand up really well to being a bag. If you're doing linen or similar other materials, get something fairly heavy. You're going to want to wash it on hot and dry it on hot. Serge the edges so that it doesn't fray. I really, really must insist you wash your wool. This is a piece of wool that hasn't been washed. You can see it still had the glaze on it. And here's a piece of wool that has been washed. And there is a significant amount of shrinkage there. You have to wash your wool. Otherwise, if you end up washing your bag later, everything is just going to shrink up and it's going to look awful. That goes for the linen as well. The other things that you're going to want to get are some sort of embroidered floss. Pearl cotton. I prefer pearl cotton because it has a nice twist to it and it stands up really well. You can use silk or even a wool. Find something with a good twist that'll handle being braided a lot. If you can't find any of that, these size 5 skeins you can often get at Joann's or Michael's will do. They're a little thick, but they come in a range of colors. You'll also want to get yourself some heat and bond. This is how you'll be making your applique. It's got a sticky, heat-activated sticky on one side and paper on the other that you can see through to draw your designs in. Get the heat and bond light. It's not really necessary to get anything more heavy than heat and bond light because you'll be tacking things down pretty quickly. The following are some sources for wool. Denverfabrics.com, if you search under coating, you can find quite a bit. Fabrics.com, if you search under Melton, there's a lot there. I get a lot of my wool off of eBay. If you're lucky enough to live next to Pendleton Wool Mills, go there. Get a heavy wool, again 100%. For linens, I personally use fabrics-store.com. And this is for lining. I like IL019 as the weight. It's a nice medium weight linen work, so you can get stuff at Joann's. And cottons and similar are okay too if you don't want to use linen. For pearl cotton, I would suggest Hirschners.com, size 5 pearl cotton. You can also find some of this at Pacific Fabrics. Joann's has a very limited color selection, and again, eBay. But Hirschners.com has almost everything that you're going to need. So, that's it for this first session. If you have any questions, please email me at laurelyn@recreatedartifacts.com, and I'll see you next Tuesday.